Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'll just let everyone sit down, and then I'll do some intros. Just while everyone finds their face, I'm a long way away. There we go. I'm Chris, Associate Director and Head of Comms at Yap Global. We're a PR agency supporting the European Blockchain Convention. So hopefully you've all seen us running around. Really nice to see so many people here. But not about me. This is about bringing DeFi to everyone's pocket. And is it ever going to happen? So I'd like to just start by getting our panel to introduce themselves to you. So Alexei, do you want to kick us off?
So, hey everyone, I'm Alexei. I'm the co-founder of Bob. We specialize in bringing Bitcoin to DeFi. So what we're building is something we consider the gateway to Bitcoin DeFi. We have made it our mission to make Bitcoin DeFi more accessible, make it transparent, secure, and reliable. So if you have Bitcoin, you want yields, you go to Bob and you pick your strategy and it's one click. And I think, yeah, that's what we're talking about here today.
Amazing.
So, hi everyone. My name is Joaquin. I'm the COO of Taiko. Taiko is the first and so far only base rollup on Ethereum. So it's kind of like the only solution that scales Ethereum in a decentralized manner. So we bring to DeFi scalability and security.
Hi everyone. My name is Sebastian. I lead business development here at Yield.xyz. What's Yield.xyz? We are an API infrastructure layer that aggregates yield opportunities on chain across native staking, liquid staking, restaking, and DeFi. And we do that so that our clients, which are typically wallets, exchanges, and neobanks, can go to market with an earn feature in a matter of weeks instead of months of integration with individual protocols and staking providers.
Hi, I'm Alan, and I'm working for Bybit EU. Bybit EU is like a new entity that after the license with Mika, we open a new entity, and I'm leading the Spanish market.
Amazing, thank you. Well, today we're going to go through a number of topics. We're going to cover off things like infrastructure and trust and regulation and a bit of culture as well. So I want to start by jumping in on user experience. And I think the thing for me specifically is the most important piece is making this about the user. So I don't know, Joaquin, maybe I start with you. DeFi promised open finance, yet usability is still the biggest roadblock. Why has user experience lagged so far, do you think?
Okay, good question. I think to answer the question, I will start by breaking down what DeFi actually brings to the table. DeFi is just a way of connecting people across the globe through financial products using the internet and the blockchain. So if we dive into this definition, we see that first of all, they connect people without an intermediary, peer-to-peer. Then through financial products, I guess today everyone that has a financial product, they interact with their bank. If you want a mortgage, the bank. If you want a loan, the bank. Well, DeFi enables me to give a loan to someone in, I don't know, someone in South Africa that I don't know. And I don't want to know because I know that he will repay the loan because it's in the code, right? That's what DeFi enables. I don't need an intermediary to make it happen.
Mic drop.
All okay? Okay. And using internet and blockchain technology, of course. So if you think about it, right, we are giving individuals the power to do functions that before were reserved for banks or other financial institutions. That is a lot of responsibility, right? And that is scary to some extent. And I think one of the reasons why DeFi hasn't been adopted so far is because, first of all, people don't want responsibility. Like people prefer to interact with a centralized exchange than with DeFi and hold their own keys. Second of all, because regulation hasn't picked up. I think innovation goes faster than regulation, and DeFi is a very good example. There's so many types of assets that cannot be plugged into DeFi today, like real-world assets, most of them, securities. And of course, user experience is something that needs to be improved. Using a wallet is not intuitive. Security of the wallet is not there. I've been I've been scammed like last year, and I've been using crypto for several years. So if I get scammed, I guess my dad could get scammed. So that's why my dad is not getting into blockchain or into DeFi, right? So I guess UX, lack of regulation, and security are the main reasons why DeFi is not yet mainstream.
Thank you. Alexei, I mean, maybe you could follow up here. From a new user's perspective, what do you think the hardest parts are today? Like wallets, gas fees, or just understanding?
Well, I mean, people, when they're using financial like assets and finance, like think about neobanks like Revolut, N26, Monzo, right? They really emerged by simplifying the banking system, right? Simple app, simple interface, and then they started offering you products where you could just deposit your assets into a managed account, and you get like what 2 to 3 to 4%, and it's just one click, right? And you just trust them. And of course, initially they also struggled with the trust issue, right? But since neobanks are regulated, they get licenses, right? People start trusting them. Crypto is a bit different because the trust here is based on technological advancement, right? You have a smart contract, it's immutable, your assets cannot be stolen. But for me as a user, well, how do I really know what the smart contract does, right? I'm not usually able to look at the code, not because it's not there, it's all open source, but how many people actually can read code? So you trust the app, and then the app isn't someone who is licensed. Often it's not a well-established platform, it's a startup, it's new, and you have this hurdle initially to build trust, and trust is always perceived. And the way we've kind of tried to solve this trust question in crypto was, oh, well, let's be super transparent. You have to set up your own wallet, you manage your own passphrase, and then you have to go on chain, and you have to bridge your assets. And yeah, this is, by the way, a bridged asset. It's a wrapper, so you know that. So we've kind of tried to compensate here with being overly transparent. And I think that's really good for power users who know what they're doing. But then for retail users, and like, same, like my dad, he doesn't care that it's a wrapped asset. Like he just has, if you have BTC and you want to earn yield on it, well, you just want the yield, right? And you want to know that you're going to get it back. And so I think what we kind of went through is a phase of building the infrastructure, making sure that you can have trustless interactions, and for power users, you can allow them to understand what they're doing, and now we can work on simplifying it. But then the trust will come from, if you look at Aave, like why do we trust Aave? Well, because it's so big. It's been around for a long time. If you compare it to like banks, it's actually up there, and that's how people trust it. They don't trust it because they can read the code at this point. And I think, with time, as time passes, you build this reputation, and you have more institutions and bigger players using it. And honestly, I think with exchanges like Coinbase, for example, moving into the space and offering CDeFi products, where the exchange is the front end, but DeFi is the back end, like what they did with Morpho, it is a very good starting point, because you start to essentially tell users, well, it's okay to be on chain, it's secure, we'll offer it to you curated at first, but that's like the first step. And I think the more users start, using Aave, Morpho, and Uniswap through centralized interfaces, the more users will eventually transition to like using DeFi more natively.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to bring you in, Alan, from Bybit's perspective. So Bybit has millions of users interacting with crypto every day. What can DeFi learn from CeFi's focus on simplicity and mobile experience, do you think?
I mean, I think Bybit's mission has been always the innovation and the product experience, right? The user experience in general. So I think in Bybit EU, now that is a new entity, we're also trying to make that bridge into making the app like accessible for everyone. So for example, we just recently launched a new product that is the light version, and that is our commitment to that kind of entry user that is not a crypto native. And now with the MiCA license, that we can engage at different kind of audiences that people can really access. And as someone was mentioning in the panel, like how can we make it for everyone, right? So imagine you wanted your father or your grandma to kind of get into crypto. It's an easy gateway, right? So I think Bybit is very committed into, from a, let's say, DeFi perspective, to make it reliable and trustable. Now with MiCA, and also from a CeFi perspective, from a CeFi perspective, and from a DeFi to don't forget the innovation part, right? So yeah, I think that's basically how I would frame it.
Amazing, thank you. Sebastian, when it comes to DeFi, what do you think users really want? Do you think they want returns, simplicity, or just trust?
I think all of those three are very, very important. I think returns attract the users into the ecosystem, but what keeps coming them back is trust, right? And for us, as a B2B2C company, we look at cybersecurity as one of the main trust factors. We saw what happened approximately a month ago with one of the staking providers, and so internally we take cybersecurity super, super seriously. We hired white hat hacker, in-house white hat hacker, who every day tries to penetrate our systems to make sure that they are foolproof. We have a new protocol called Shield, which mathematically proves that the transaction that is being proposed is the same exact one as the one that's about to get signed. The user also has the ability to download the transaction into a readable format to make sure that what they're about to broadcast to the network is exactly what they intend to do. So I think trust is probably the most important element out of those three.
Thank you. I'm just going to move on to technology and infrastructure now to spend a bit of time here. So I'll start with you, Joaquin, if that's OK. So great UX depends on invisible infrastructure. What are the foundational pieces still missing to make DeFi truly seamless, do you think?
Okay. I guess, first of all, when I think about DeFi, I think about Ethereum mostly, because most of the TVL lives on Ethereum. And when I think about Ethereum, I think Ethereum plus all the layer 2s. But it turns out that specifically for DeFi, that's a problem, because each layer 2 is isolated in terms of liquidity. If we want a seamless user experience in DeFi, first of all, we need unified liquidity, either via interoperability solutions that are really trustworthy. I'm sorry, but breaches probably don't fall into this category, in my opinion. Most of the money stolen in DeFi has been on breaches, smart contracts, or through what we call synchronous composability, which is having the ability to tap into the liquidity of Ethereum seamlessly without breaches via CK technology plus share sequencer. So that's one thing. I think rollups can enable that. Base rollups can enable that. Second thing, to make the DeFi experience as seamless as possible, I guess, would be on the wallet side. I think account abstraction has room for improvement. Social login. We need to make the Web3 experience as similar as possible to Web 2.1, because that's what users on the internet are used to, I guess. So the combination of unfragmented liquidity plus making the UX much more easier and intuitive can bring DeFi mainstream.
Thank you. Do you have any thoughts on bridges? I saw you.
Well, I think there's kind of two camps, I guess, in DeFi, and this has been a discussion we've had for ages. Like, do we have app chains where each kind of chain is actually really just a place for people to go and use, and people care about the products and not the infrastructure, or will we have multiple different chains that people will move around? And I think what we have today is we have a very strong core user base in DeFi that moves assets from chain to chain, goes farming new opportunities, new incentive campaigns. And they care about bridges, but retail users, realistically, they just go to the platform they trust. They want a simple interface. They don't care about the chain. And I think, from a chain's perspective, right, you want to keep your users. Like, you're a platform. Like, Binance doesn't necessarily want their users to be able to move to another platform. And same for Bybit, right? They probably don't want users to go away from Bybit into another exchange, right? What you want is to provide your users on your platform the best possible experience, and then, attract other users. And I think that's where I think interoperability is definitely an aspect, but I think it will be hidden from the user. I don't think retail cares. Who cares are the market makers, the solvers, the apps like that act in the background that form part of the apps and the infrastructure, and they might need to rebalance between different chains. But for users at the end, they really just care about the apps, and I think their account abstraction and smart accounts is probably the bigger unlock than making interoperability better. People don't want to worry about how things settle in the background. When you go to an ATM, you withdraw cash. You don't care how the ATM talks to your bank account. You really don't. And so really like paying fees in any token, having a social login, a passkey, basically merging the standards of just like security that as we have them today with DeFi applications is the way to go.
Amazing. You kind of mentioned Alan and Bybit there, so I'm just going to jump over just to ask, I guess as Bybit moves towards DeFi integration, how do you see CeFi and DeFi converging technically and commercially as well?
Yeah, I mean, we have an internal project that is called ByReal. That is a project that was incubated by Bybit, and it's a DEX. It's like Uniswap, and basically it's our way of having that kind of mix between CeFi, DeFi. And I think the offer and in a way, I was also listening to the panelists, and I do agree that we need to lift too much complexity when it comes to the user journey. I mean, before being in Bybit, I was in a layer 1 project, and I remember like how complex it was for me even to understand like how to connect like many aggregators into like connect MetaMask, and then from MetaMask to layer 1 and so on. So I think in our case, for example, with ByReal, we have that kind of offer to our users as well to choose, right, between you want to use DeFi or CeFi. And I think it's as well an invitation for everyone in the ecosystem to make something more friendly, right? And now that we are making that proper bridge between Web 2 and Web 3, I think we should really commit into be giving not only like a better user experience, but like a more easy and let's say an easier path for the user to really understand the ecosystem. Because in a way, for most of the majority that are not crypto native, it might be very complex.
Thank you. Seb, Yield aggregates protocols behind the scenes, but what's the hardest tech challenge in abstracting that complexity safely, do you think?
For sure. So if you think about where we are today, when you onboard a new user into our ecosystem, they have to first open an account with an exchange like Bybit. Then they have to on-ramp some funds, send it to a MetaMask wallet, land on Morpho's website, maybe do a few swaps and bridges in the interim. Bridging is extremely scary. When you land on the Morpho website, you have a huge selection of vaults that you can choose from. All of them look the same. The only thing that changes are the APYs. Let's say you select a vault, you deploy some funds, and then you generate yield in not just your deposit token, but some incentive tokens like Morpho token and Well token, tokens that you probably don't even want as a user. So super complex. What we've done at Yield.xyz is we've abstracted a lot of this complexity away. We have smart contracts that for our users, if they have, let's say, some even fiat in their checking account, we can automatically on-ramp the funds for them. We can swap them, we can bridge them, deploy them into a Morpho vault. Every 8 hours, we are able to harvest the rewards that they're generating in that Morpho vault. We swap everything back into the deposit token, and we redeploy them into the vault to make sure that the APY that they receive is the actual one that's displayed on the Morpho vault. So we've worked really, really hard to try to abstract as much of the complexity away as possible. And I think where we are today is a much more seamless and user-friendly experience.
Awesome, thank you. I'm actually going to stick with you. We've talked a bit about trust, but I'd like to talk a bit more about regulation and safety as well. So maybe we just start with the fact security and trust remain the biggest obstacles. How do you design systems that feel safe enough for everyday users?
For sure. So as an API, we are just a technology layer that essentially crafts the transaction that allows you to deploy funds on-chain. So from a regulatory perspective, we are not exposed per se, but the clients we work with are. So all of the neobanks like D-Block and Tuyo, who we work very closely with, they KYC and KYB all of their users, and we make sure that we are as compliant as possible on our side, on the cybersecurity aspect of things, where we have checks in place to make sure we protect customer funds as much as possible.
Joaquin, anything to add to that?
I guess not really. I think you covered mostly everything. But when it comes to the blockchain infrastructure level, I think Ethereum is the safest for sure, and when we talk about security, I like to think of it from two angles. First of all, is blockchain security, which is where Ethereum excels. Why? Because you need so much money to make a 51% attack. It's secure by, of course, it's secure by a lot of different validators on a very decentralized manner, but at the same time, it's secure by a lot of ETH. And in order to take over the network, you need a lot of ETH, which is impossible as of today. But I also think of security from application or a smart contract level, and I think Alexei mentioned it before. This is where it gets a little bit trickier because you need to trust someone that will do the job properly. There's audits, of course, but audits can fail, and this is where I think open source makes a very important attribute for blockchain security, because the fact that anyone in the space can check the code, and it happens a lot, and report a bug is very important. If anyone can see something and no one says anything about it, it's more unlikely that the code is buggy.
Great, thank you. Alexei, Bitcoin's always led with security first. How does that ethos influence how we build trustworthy DeFi?
I mean, that's a very good question, because there has been quite the disconnect between Bitcoin and DeFi for over a decade now. Bitcoin has suffered and gone through a bit of a dark age after the block size wars, when Bitcoin Cash split up, and then everybody within the core Bitcoin community, a lot of people kind of were shunned. Like if you wanted to change Bitcoin, add more tools, you were kind of told, well, go somewhere else. We don't want this here. But then over the last 3 years, we've kind of entered a Bitcoin renaissance where a lot of innovators have come back, started building on Bitcoin. We've had ordinals like NFTs on Bitcoin, and now for the first time, we have native Bitcoin staking. We have a way to build real rollups on Bitcoin, right? The way that we have them on Ethereum, we can now actually do this on BTC, which of course raises the question of like, okay, do you need 5,000 different chains if you can do all of that on Bitcoin, which is the most secure chain? It has the most widely adopted digital asset. It's the one thing that everybody trusts in crypto, whether you're ETH maxi, Solana maxi, everybody likes Bitcoin. The challenge and I think that's a very good way to visualize the struggle of Bitcoin users with DeFi, because like security is not just about the chain. Like, people trust Ethereum, people trust Bitcoin. We're not talking necessarily about that kind of a security. Then the smart contract logic, well, okay, people can learn to trust that. The difficulty is still with this perception, right? A very good example is Bitcoin here. There is no way currently, just yet, to use Bitcoin natively in DeFi. If you want to use it in DeFi, you have to go to Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, all these other chains, and you have to use a bridge. Now, the problem is there's 50 different bridges. There's 50 different wrappers across 50 plus different chains. How do you choose? They all have different risk models. It's not transparent. People don't know. And that choice, and often like in DeFi, we feel like, oh, we'll give the user the choice. We'll show all these details, and they will have to, and we tell them do your own research, and that just doesn't work. Like, people don't want to do their own research. So it's really like, I think we built a very secure system. We're very transparent about it. There's very secure ways to use DeFi, and sure, bridges are obviously always a problem. But if you want to get to mass adoption and onboard the new users, not the same kind, not fight for the same pool of DeFi power users, but actually bring in new users. And again, Bitcoin is a prime example. There's over 300 million people that have BTC, and they want to use it, but it's just very painful to do. And working with Bitcoin users is probably the most difficult in the space. Of course, at least in terms of crypto users. Of course, if you go to somebody who has never used anything but a bank, it's more difficult. But they are very conservative in terms of like what they do with the Bitcoin, how to use it, and it's quite interesting that Bitcoin DeFi, although Bitcoin as a chain, as an asset, are perceived as very secure, DeFi for Bitcoin is perceived as risky, because there is no easy way to on-ramp, there is no single unified platform just yet that allows you to just one-click deploy into all these different products and chains and abstracts this complexity for you. At least, there are platforms, like we just built something, but it's still new, and the only way to gain trust is by working with some of the bigger institutions, plugging this in as a backend to trusted providers like centralized exchange platforms, wallets, and so on. where you essentially build perceived trust for the user. And of course, you have to hold up your end of the promise and make sure that the smart contracts are audited and that you have enough users. And eventually, people will start trusting the system because you've built the brand. Like again, example of Aave. But there is no way to shortcut this, right? It just takes time. And the only way that we can improve this is essentially by, as a DeFi ecosystem, not going out and saying, oh, let's replace all the centralized providers, or let's replace TradFi, and go directly use DeFi, manage your own private key, but rather working together and offering better solutions, because DeFi often has a better solution product-wise. It's 24/7, it's always accessible, it's transparent, it's easier to verify and to basically also build other products around it. And so, what we're seeing with exchanges right now is probably the correct first step of bridging this gap, and then you'll see more bigger financial institutions probably board that ship as well.
Thank you. Alan, Europe's rolling out MiCA. How can regulation build confidence without killing innovation?
I mean, I can put an example. We were talking previously about Bitcoin. Maybe it's a different topic, but I just want to add in and link into your question. I think, for example, for us, Bitcoin has been like the gateway into making or serving as that connector for institutions. I mean, part of their treasury, they want to have a part of it on Bitcoin and so on. So we serve as them for like their not only liquidity providers, but like their custodians for making this. And then when it comes for, can you repeat the question?
Of course, yeah. It was that Europe is rolling out MiCA.
Yeah.
How can regulation build confidence without killing innovation? Yeah.
Yes. And then link it into that. I mean, for example, I don't know if you guys know, but we have the Bybit card, for example. That is a clear example of how, from a product offer perspective, I mean, now you can see that bridge between Web 2 and Web 3, right? Like we have a partner with MasterCard, and that's our commitment. And I think that's what it centralized into our focus into bringing literally DeFi to everybody's pocket. Is like as simple as having your card, making this on-ramp from fiat to crypto, and just tapping into your Apple Pay, so you can have it virtually or physically. And the way that we are doing that is, so we are using the framework that MiCA has set up to be compliant, trustworthy, and so on, and not killing the innovation, right? Like how do we make it seamlessly and giving like a different offer compared to some other, because yes, maybe there might be many other options of cards, but that's our proposal for the users to have this kind of gap between the two ecosystems in a way.
Thank you. I'm gonna jump into the future because I'm conscious of time. But let's talk about global adoption, stablecoins, and culture. Yeah, let's fast forward. If DeFi really and truly reaches everyone's pocket, what does that look like from an onboarding and everyday use? Maybe I'll start. Joaquin, do you want to maybe start with that one?
Sure. I guess it needs to be completely abstracted. I think, well, first of all, it needs to replicate a Web2 experience, that's for sure, if we want it to be massively onboarded. And I would say that DeFi is massively onboarded when corporates start using DeFi. Why? Because one of the things that we are focusing on in Taiko is on corporative institutional adoption. We believe that that's where the real money lies. I think 95% of DeFi users today are just yield farmers, are looking for the yield. I'm sorry, but that's not adoption. Every chain is putting a lot of money to make their yield the highest and attract the TVL, except Ethereum, and that's not real adoption. So I guess when the user experience is completely abstracted, like Web2-like, and we see institutions, corporates putting their money on DeFi, I would say that's when DeFi could be massively adopted, and yeah, we can say it's part of our lives.
Awesome, thank you. Seb, do you want to jump in with your thoughts?
For sure. So I think one of the parts of the ecosystem where we've seen mass adoption already is stablecoins. I think stablecoins have a perfect product to market fit. And at Yield, we are working more and more with US-based payment service providers that operate in the remittance business, and families in the US that want to, for example, send some money back to their extended family in Brazil, Mexico, or other parts of Latin America. Before, it would be a very complex system through the SWIFT network. They would be killed on exchange fees. Now they have these apps that they can download from the App Store. They can KYC and essentially have access to stablecoins. So they're able to send USDC or USDT down to a family member in Brazil, and then their family member in Brazil can decide if they want to off-ramp that down to Brazilian reals or keep it in stables on that same platform and generate yield on that USDC or USDT. So I think that's where we've seen mass adoption, and stablecoins just have like a perfect product market fit, and we have to continue building on that.
Alexei, do you want to add anything?
Well, I mean, I fully agree. Like, I mean, it has to be fully abstracted. I will say that, you know, yield is still probably the hook, right? I think yield is what's maybe missing in like a lot of the traditional banks. That's why neobanks emerged and essentially you now have like Apple offering yield basically on dollars, right? And that's what attracts users. Everybody hates inflation. Everybody's very conscious of like, you know, maintaining their purchasing power. So, you know, yield is certainly where DeFi can excel because you have much more sophisticated ways of how you can build these products in a transparent and composable way. Now, of course, you know, yield farmer, like the question is where does yield come from? If it's just from chains like throwing their native token, yeah, that doesn't really work, right? So, you know, it works if you have like, you know, if you want to just bootstrap and you, essentially that's what PayPal did, right? They were giving out free money to onboard users, but eventually it has to kind of work. But yeah, so I think, you know, the question is how do you actually, you know, get sustainable yield from DeFi? And that's still where there's a struggle right now because it's just compared to the size of you know, the demand. And again, same problem with bringing in Bitcoin. Again, Bitcoin is bigger than everything else. There's so much demand to earn yield on Bitcoin, but then like what we do is we try to match like people who look for yield with products that match a risk profile. And the problem with DeFi is that you have these products, but the size is just limited. So you end up right now still trying to find a balance between off-chain and on-chain yield sources just because, well, DeFi is still growing.
Thank you. Alan, you've called stablecoins DeFi's Trojan horse. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I mean, I call them the Trojan horse just basically with what Sebastian mentioned, right? I think they have served in so many countries where you suffer inflation, like, you know, Venezuela, Argentina, Mexico, where you have this kind of volatility. And I think the stablecoins has served as a gateway for the people to have a sustainable economy, right? So I think the best way that you can see that DeFi is becoming on a daily basis is when you start seeing this kind of, let's say, utility for people that, for example, I remember in Argentina back in the days when the dollar was getting higher and higher, it was the only way to kind of stabilize somehow. And people were very into the mass adoption and crypto adoption because of that. So that's why I call them the Trojan horses, because they have become like naturally, smoothly into a daily day-to-day basis.
Thank you. We're getting towards the end, so I'm going to just do a bit of a closing round question here. What single milestone would tell you that DeFi has gone mainstream? What's our iPhone moment, do you think? Who'd like to take it first?
I mean, I think, again, always kind of, you know, wearing, like, you know, waving the Bitcoin flag here. You have the ETF right now, which is a perfect way of, you know, achieving more distribution, getting more people, you know, to buy whole Bitcoin. And that's often like the, you know, the gateway into crypto anyway. From our perspective, I think, you know, when we know we've succeeded with DeFi is when there's more Bitcoin used in DeFi in a trust minimized manner on Bitcoin L2s and other chains than is locked up in the ETFs. Because then you actually, then you see that, okay, we've built a system that can stomach and actually, you know, provide products to that kind of capital. And if we don't succeed, and if in, you know, 10 years down the road, I have to go to my bank and ask if I am allowed to send around Bitcoin and use it, well, then actually we failed as an entire industry.
Thank you. Okay.
I would say when regulated corporates step into DeFi, that would be the moment where I feel like DeFi is mainstream adopted. I think we are already seeing a trend with RWAs. Even governments are via stablecoins, to continue with the Trojan horse analogy. They're even using stablecoins and DeFi in a sense, stablecoins to refinance their debt. We're seeing it with the Genius Act of the United States. Like, turns out that that Trump is now allowing making stablecoins legal, and one of the assets, of the few assets that you can collateralize that stablecoin with, is the U.S. Treasuries. So they are using DeFi and stablecoins to refinance their debt, which is crazy. So, but again, I think they have an interest to do so. I think corporates that are so regulated, they have obligations with their clients when they step into real DeFi and not only tokenization and leave the assets on the wallet like DeFi. I would say, okay, DeFi is mainstream adopted.
Thank you. Yeah, and for me, it is when we see Aave, Spark by MakerDAO, or Morpho available on our traditional banking apps like Santander or Barclays. That would be awesome. I think we first started by having access to earn features on exchanges like Bybit. Now we graduated to making those available on neobank platforms like Revolut, where you can stake. You have a limited staking offering, but you can stake your assets. But the real win will be when we have access to DeFi on major traditional banking platforms.
Awesome. Final word from Alan.
I mean, thinking back on a mainstream momentum, I think, for example, in Bybit was when they offered TradeFi, right? That it was like the first time that an exchange became more than a SEX and more like a, let's say, a traditional, institutional, more offering gold or some other things beyond just only stable coins or any kind of tokens, right? So yeah, and I hope that we can do much better for the future as well.
Amazing. Well, I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining me today, and thank you for all attending. Give a round of applause for the panelists.